All right, we're starting now. Shalom, shalom to the family. It's your brother McGunn from the Lines of Israel. You know, all praises to the Most High. Shabbat shalom to everybody. All praise to the Most High for good health, right? And another day that He granted us in the name of His Son, right? So today the topic will be: are Hispanics, Latinos, and Native Americans Israelites, right? So the brother Mala'at, from the mighty AOC, he's going to present, a presentation. He's going to give some information, and some edification on the topic. Okay, a lot of misconceptions out there, so we're just going to go ahead and present the information, present the history, give you evidence, give you archaeological information, and give you also logical information, because that's one thing that our people lack is logic, right? So we're going to give you explanation, evidence, and the brother Mala'at is going to go in, man. So go ahead, brother, do your thing.
Yeah, so I'll jump right into it. Like the brother said, a lot of misinformation, and it seems like this topic matter seems to it dies down, then it comes back up, then it dies down. But and when you really examine and you see a lot of the things that's being brought forth to say that natives and so-called Latinos of the native or Negro stock are not Israelites, it's a bunch of fallacies, it's pseudo scholarship. So I'm just gonna jump straight into it, man. I have a 80 slide PowerPoint, but I'm going to show 49 slides because this is part 1 of part 2. So there will be a part 2. So this is just going to be part 1. So without further ado, give me 1 second.
Right, and while you do that, I'll just let the people know, when it comes to information, but to do your research, man. You can't go off meme scholarship for your own opinion, and deal with facts and correlate that, to the prophecies and everything that the scriptures talk about. So as the brother presents his presentation, I want y'all brothers and sisters to take notes, investigate whatever it is he's bringing out, and study it. All right, you're gonna find out that what we're bringing out is the truth, man. All right, so good.
Can you see my screen?
Yeah, good.
I show this because this is something that when you go on YouTube, you type this video in right here, right? The Spencer's Wedded Out Full documentary, because this is presentation I did a while back, I believe at with Joel Benjamin bookstore, and it was pertaining to the Whited Out 4 documentary we'll be speaking on tonight. So if there's any more information that anybody would like to see aside from the PowerPoint today, you can type up this video on YouTube, and you see a little more information brought forth. And it's basically cutting the same doctrine that we cut it tonight. But this is a reference that you can go to. So you just go to YouTube, type in this title of the video, and you can find it. And this is these are the people who created that documentary right here. Here we go. These are the people that speak on who is and who isn't Israelites, but yet they bring in heathen nations into the fold, baptizing Edomites. These are the kind of people that come out with the teachings as to, the natives and not Israelites. Look at who they bring into the fold. So we'll start off with this simple video. Matter of fact, Magun, you hear me?
Yeah, what's up, King?
How does the audio sound on the video right now? Because not if you have the videos ready, I would like for you to play one of the videos.
All right, give me a second. So you want the first video with let me get the charger.
The
Phone charger. Yeah, I got you right now. Let me plug in the aux cord and everything.
one. The play is on the screenshot you'll see Bible verses. That video.
Con, I got you right now. I'm gonna share my screen. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and go to the videos. Right.
Power on. Auxiliary input mode.
What I'll do is go ahead and play. Oh, 1 second.
Con.
Let me know if you can hear me, King.
I hear it.
Okay, so
is your video showing right now?
Yeah, it's showing. Can you see it on my screen?
All right. Hold on. I'm actually still looking at my screen. Okay, I'm looking at your screen. I see.
See it?
Yeah, Con.
Okay, so let me know when you're ready.
Go ahead, King. No, not this one. I'll go to
oh, it's lock it. Right.
The other one.
Got you.
Which shows the Bible verses. Yeah.
Got you. It's on you, King. Let me know.
Verse 11. And it shall come to pass in that day that Yahuwah shall set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people, which shall be left from Assyria. Now, remember, the Assyrian king took the 10 tribes.
Can you hear me now?
Con.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so I just want to make sure I'm bringing a little back. Matter of fact, let me just do it again.
Chapter 11, verse 11. And it shall come to pass in that day that Yahuwah shall set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people, which shall be left from Assyria. Now, remember, the Assyrian king took the 10 tribes, took Issachar and Gad to Assyria. Remember? So that's there. And in Pathros, and in Cush, and in Elam, and in Sham, and in Elam, the island of that's sea. So the Most High is going to have to gather Gad, chapter 11, verse 11. And it shall come to pass in that day that Yahuwah shall set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people, which shall be left from Assyria. Now, remember, the Assyrian king took the 10 tribes.
You can stop it there, King.
And Gad to us.
Yeah. All right, so I'm gonna share my my screen now. So now, can you see my screen?
Yeah, Con.
All right, so now, why did I bring out that clip, right? Because one of the teachings is to say that the northern kingdom, the 10 tribes, only were scattered in these regions, in Assyria and Pathros Syria, and they say that only Judah, Benjamin, and Levi were scattered throughout the four corners of the earth, right? But here's how you know they're taking the scripture out of context, because to teach that from this particular verse here, it will contradict all the other verses which speak of the Israelites being scattered throughout the four corners of the earth, wouldn't it? So now, when you go to Jeremiah 31, chapter 31, verse 6 to 8, right? Let's see what it says. It says, "For there shall be a day that the watchmen upon the Mount Ephraim shall cry, Arise ye, and let us go up to Zion unto the Lord our God." Why did I start from 6:8? Because it lets you know the context and who's speaking of, about Ephraim and the northern kingdom. Verse 7, "For thus saith the Lord, sing with gladness for Jacob, and shut out among the chief of the nations. Publish ye, O Lord, save thy people, the remnant of Israel. Behold, I will bring them from the north country," and some may say the north country is north of the Euphrates. Okay, let's say it does mean that, but let's keep on reading. "And gather them from the coasts of the earth." It's speaking about the whole earth, the coasts of the earth, "and with them the blind and the lame, the woman with the child, and her that travaileth with child together, a great company shall return thither." You see, it says the coasts of the earth. It didn't just delegate a couple small areas in which the northern kingdom was scattered in, not just Syria, not just Pathros, not just Mesopotamia, so on and so forth. The scriptures say the coasts of the earth. And now, of course, we all know James 1:1. This is a cut to that teaching. James, the servant of God and of the Lord, who the world calls Jesus Christ, to the 12 tribes which are scattered abroad, greeting. So this is a cut for any of these brothers, unfortunately, and sisters that say that it was only the southern kingdom which was scattered throughout the four corners, and that the northern kingdom is still over in the Middle East, which, you know, of course, a large portion is, but you can't just say they're over there, because that would contradict scripture. So I'm moving on to the next. If you see my screen, play.
Con, I got you right now.
It's going to be the one where he's speaking about King Solomon.
Got you. I'm share my screen.
Heard about the Mexicans and Indians coming off the slave ships.
Okay.
Other one? Okay, got you.
Yeah.
As well, Solomon had all kinds of wives from other nations. So they look. Well, if you look up the word bastard, you're gonna see that a bastard is a Jew man, a man who is or Yahudah. I mean, if he's of Yahudah, if he sleeps with a woman of another nationality and they have a kid, that child is considered a bastard. And know that what the law says about bastards. That is Deuteronomy chapter 23, verse 2. "A bastard shall not enter into the congregation of Yahuwah, even to his 10th generation shall he not enter into the congregation of Yahuwah." So even though Solomon had many strange wives, none of those children was accepted into the congregation of Joshua or Israel. So Solomon had to sleep with a Hebrew Israelite woman, and his son, who he had from this Hebrew Israelite woman, Greek born, is the one reign. And you can now that is in 1 Kings chapter 11, verse, just to make sure I'm right. 11 and 43. Yeah, and Solomon slept with his fathers and was buried, and Rehoboam, his son, reigned in his stead. So Rehoboam had to have been a Hebrew Israelite because the children of his wives, that's if he even had children from his wives, because scripture does not record him having any children from his wives. He had Edomite women, Yamanite wives, but it doesn't say that he had children. Either. But even if he did, hopefully that bastard is not accepted. You can look up bastard in the Strong's Concordance. I have, let's see, bastard, it gives me the number 4464. Let's see, 4464. Bastard is a mamzer, which y'all already knew that. It says a mongrel that is born of a Jewish father and a heathen mother. Jewish father and a heathen mother. Those strange wives that Solomon had. Those were all bastards. They were conflicted. Still black. Well, and many wives.
That's it on that, King.
That was it on that. All right. It was from me looking at it. I don't know if it was skipping on your end, but I know on my end the whole video was basically skipping, so like the audio wasn't really clear. I just hope when we play it back, it's not like that. But anyway, what he's basically saying in the video is another point that they use to say that the natives are so like the fact that these natives are mixed, so on and so forth, and according to the scripture, any mixed person is a bastard. It's not an Israelite. He went on to bring out the definition of a bastard, but yet there's different when you go into different Bible dictionaries, it might give different meanings to it. So that's why you need to know what is a bastard according to scripture, right? Then he goes on to say, Solomon's son reigned on his stead, which was Rehoboam. We all know that. So Rehoboam could not have had a heathen mother. But this is how you know, unfortunately, this brother doesn't know the scripture, or maybe he forgot it. Who knows? Because when you go into scripture, and I'm going to share my screen. What do we see in scripture? Remember, he said, a bastard is not accepted into the congregation. If that's the case, then how is his son Rehoboam able to be the next king after King Solomon? It says 1 Kings chapter 14 and verse 21. It says, Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, reigned in Judah. Rehoboam was 41 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 17 years in Jerusalem, the city which the Lord did choose out of all the tribes of Israel to put his name there. And his mother's name was Naamah and Ammonitis. Naamah and Ammonitis. Once more, Naamah and Ammonitis. So Rehoboam's mom was a heathen. She was an Ammonitis, but yet and still Rehoboam was not cast out. Why? Because it's all through the father's line, pursuant to Numbers chapter 1, verse 18. You understand? And Moses' sons, whom he had from a Cushite woman, they're still listed in the genealogy when you read First and Second Chronicles in the genealogy of Levi. Why? Because they were still considered Israel, not bastards. So that's cut to that doctrine. You understand? So this man must have glossed over this scripture, or he's hoping that the viewers of his video wouldn't come across the scripture. But this is a cut to that. Moving on. Now you could go to the next video, King.
Got you. I'm gonna share my screen right now.
Heard about Mexicans and Indians coming up with slave ships at the same time, being oppressed together with us. I never heard of Indians and Mexicans being hung on trees, being lynched, being burned alive, being castrated. They being cut out of them. And all of this being made to work slave labor with no pay. So Israel is still in the Middle East, in all of them places where the Bible says they are. I know a lot of y'all like to try to run to the Apocrypha. I want to run to other books because you can't prove these lies with the Bible, but the Bible will show you up every time. In fact, I'm heard about Mexicans and Indians coming up.
Yeah, that's it on that.
Con King. So as you can see, this brother actually, he's definitely not learned on Native American history, right? Or like I said, maybe he's just hoping that his viewers, you know, are not up on Native American history. Because for him to say that the Mexicans, the Aztecs were never enslaved, they never worked hard labor, free labor. It's completely insane. There's countless history books, you know, documentation. You know, even the most laymen of man know the history of the natives and how they were the first to be enslaved. But this is the ignorance that's being brought forth by these people, right? And a lot of people are falling for it. So I'm gonna address that in just a minute. But I want to bring forth another brother who's pushing forth this false doctrine. Welcome to the Summer Jam screen. I blocked out his last name. As you can see, you see his face here, first name Malachi. So this is a conversation that I'm having with the brother. And this is the meme that he puts up. It shows a native, and on the back you see tied up Southern Kingdom men and women. And so I see this photo, and it's used by these brothers and sisters to say, you see, the natives had us as slaves. They had a slave. They had our people as slaves, so they can't be Israelites. You see, look at the photo. And this is the meme right here. Right? Many people that believe in this doctrine use this particular photo. And I'm going to show you how it's nonsense, because even going back to scripture, you read that Northern Kingdom, Southern Kingdom, after they split, they were warring against one another. They were killing one another. So this is something that goes back to ancient times. And this is the conversation. Let's read what this brother said. Your entire fake doctrine is based on scripture that the Northern Kingdom walked from the Euphrates to Arsareth in 1.5 years, even though it took 40 years for Israel to walk from Egypt to the Promised Land. So your vacation Bible school antics don't mean shit here. Two things to point out here. He said the Northern Kingdom walked from the Euphrates to Arsareth, America. We don't teach that they walked. I never heard a brother say that believes in natives being Israel ever say that the Northern Kingdom walked from the Euphrates to America. Mistake number one. He says, even though it took 40 years for Israel to walk from Egypt to the Promised Land. So he's trying to say the distance from Egypt to Israel is a 40-year walk. But he's mistaken. That's because we all know the Most High had Israel walking around in circles for 40 years so that first generation to come out of Egypt could pass away. You all know that. That's right there in scripture. But he's trying to use that to compare the distance, but it wasn't a distance thing. When you're talking about the walk from Egypt to Israel, they were walking around in circles. The Most High made 40 years go by until they entered the promised land. So this brother's mistaken on that point. But you see a lot, as you can see from the brother in the video and the things that this brother here is saying, and they both teach the same thing. How they're both very unlearned. They're both making common mistakes that the most layman's of brothers and sisters should know. That says, how do you determine that these white people are Israel when they and their seed have determined that they are white and from the seed of the Spaniards? Now, and then he put up this chart right here, which he didn't give the sources for, but I know exactly what it is. This is racial distribution 2000 census among so-called Latinos, right? Native Americans. But here's the thing: you have to see who's over these charts here, these censuses, right? When you see how they operate, you see that they even have Arabs marked as white. You understand? They have most Latinos marked as white. And that's what they use to say that so-called Europeans are the majority of population here in America, because they list all these other people on this side. So on paper, it seems as they're the majority. You understand? But in reality, they are the minority, even in America. And this part right here about the census and why most Latinos are marked down in the census as white, I'm going to touch that in part 2, because that right there is 20 slides worth of information, which will crush that. So, about to move on to the next slide. Let's go into the body of liberties. Anybody can look this up, body of liberties. Very great information. It says a few years after the conclusion of the war in 1641, the colonists of Massachusetts Bay passed the first formal law regulating slavery in English America in the section of the longer document known as the Body of Liberties. That's a document. The section's language allowed enslavement of those lawful captives taken in just wars, and such strangers as willingly sell themselves or are sold to us, and left room for legal bondage of others the authorities might deem enslaved in the future. The Body of Liberties codified the colonists' possession of native workers and opened the door for the expansion of African enslavement. So for that brother in the earlier video stating that the natives never went through bondage or slavery, hell, the natives were the first slaves here in America. And this through this Body of Liberties that opened the door for them to bring in the Southern Kingdom brothers, so-called African Americans, so-called West Indians. They opened the door for them to be enslaved here at this particular time and here in the Americas. You understand? So look up the Body of Liberties, and it kills the notion that the natives were never enslaved. But let's continue on. They say that this is going back to the natives having so-called Negroes, enslaved. These are what's known as the 5 civilized nations. You have the Cherokee, the Choctaw, the Creek, the Chickasaw, and the Seminole. And why are they called the 5 civilized nations? Because when the tribe of Gad came here to the Americas, they split into 500 sub-tribes. That's why they say there were 500 nations here in North America, right? Now, out of these 500 sub-tribes, these 5 are the ones who accepted slavery. But there's more to the story. The rabbit hole goes deeper. You have to understand what kind of servitude or slavery did they have the so-called Negroes in, and what were the reasons. You understand? And it's the white man that categorized and named them the 5 civilized nations. Continuing on. Now, by using that logic, right? Oh, since they enslaved if they Israelites, why would they enslave their own brothers? Well, let's stick to that logic, right? Did so-called blacks enslave other so-called blacks? What does history say? If you want to use that logic. So here's a question. Now this is the article on theroot.com by Henry Louis Gates Jr. This is The Root. 100 amazing facts about the Negro. Number 21, did black people own slaves? If so, why? One of the most vexing questions in African American history is whether free African Americans themselves owned slaves. The short answer to this question, as you might suspect it, is yes, of course. Some free black people in this country bought and sold other black people, and did so at least since 1654, continuing to do so right through the Civil War. For me, the really fascinating question about black slave owning are how many black masters were involved, how many slaves did they own, and why did they own slaves? Questions are complex, and historians have been arguing for some time over whether free blacks purchased family members as slaves in order to protect them, motivated on the one hand by benevolence and philanthropy, as historian Carter G. Woodson put it, or whether, on the other hand, they purchased other black people as an act of exploitation, primarily to exploit their free labor for profit, just as white slave owners did. The evidence shows that, unfortunately, both things are true. Once again, unfortunately, both things are true. So you did have some brothers and sisters buying slaves in order, a lot of times they would buy their own family members, so they know their family members are safe. But then you had the other, free blacks that would buy slaves out of exploitation. So they were exploiting and selling their own people for gain of profit. So if the natives are not Israelites because they own slaves, then what do you have to say about this here? It would be a contradiction to that argument. But let's continue on. The personal interest, but he admits there were instances, however, in which free Negroes had a real economic interest in the institution of slavery and held slaves in order to improve their economic status. In a fascinating essay reviewing this controversy, R. Halliburton shows that free black people have owned slaves in each of the 13 original states and later in every state that countenanced slavery, at least since Anthony Johnson and his wife Mary went to court in Virginia in 1654 to obtain the services of the indentured servant, a black man, John Castor, for life. You see this? Now let's skip the next one and just go to the last paragraph, last sentence. It says, perhaps the most insidious or desperate attempt to defend the right of black people to own slaves was the statement made on the eve of the Civil War by a group of free people of color in New Orleans, offering their services to the Confederacy, in part because they were fearful for their own enslavement. The free colored population of Louisiana owned slaves, and they are dearly attached to the native land, and they are ready to shed their blood for her defense. They have no sympathy for abolitionism, nor love for the South, but they have plenty for Louisiana. In 1861, as they fought from the British in 1854 to 1815. So we can't anybody use the argument that natives can be Israelites. If so, why would they have, some slaves of their own? With Southern Kingdom obviously here, it shows that they were having other Southern Kingdom brothers and sisters as slaves. So let's cut that argument out. Now here, who do we have here? Marie Therese Coin Claude Thomas Pierre Meteor, which is her husband, and Nicholas Augustine Metoyer. And let's find out who these people are in these photos. This is from Hutchinson Center for African and African American Research. Here's the source up top. You see the author, the article, and let's read. Coin Marie Therese, slave agriculturalist and head of a dynasty, was probably born in Natchitoches, Louisiana, near what was then the border between Spanish Texas and French Louisiana, although it is possible that she was born in Africa and came to Louisiana as a young child. Her name definitely originated in Africa, but no convincing argument has been made that traces it to one particular location. She was baptized as a slave of Louis Jethro, founder of Natchitoches, which was the first permanent settlement in Louisiana. In 1756, she was inherited by the widow of St. Denis, and then became the property of the widow's son, Pierre Antoine de St. Denis Jr. In 1758, ending up the slave of the De Soto family. Between 1761 and 1766, she had 3 black children, Marie, Don Manuel, Francois, and Jean Joseph. In 1761, a white French merchant, Claude Thomas Pierre Métayer, known as Pierre, arrived in Natchitoches, and Coin was loaned to him by her owner. They quickly entered a relationship. Between 1768 and 1784, they had 10 children, including Augustine Métayer and Lois Métayer. Between black women and white men were semi-authorized, given a customary rather than legal status through the Louisiana system of the placage, in which white men provided for free women of color in return for sexual favors. A white man living openly with a black slave as a common law wife in a shared household was more unusual and aroused the disapproval of the Catholic Church. In 1777, Father Luis de Quintanilla, the local priest, complained to local authorities about their relationship. While this caused a scandal at the time, the intervention of Madame de Soto and then Pierre's purchase and manumission of Coin in 1778 eased the situation. The children, listen to this, the children that Coin bore Pierre when a slave remained the property of her owner. In between 1776 and 1780, Pierre set about buying his enslaved children from the De Soto family. Coin, Pierre, and the children lived together for the next decade. This was the period of financial and familial stability. Although Coin's 3 oldest children remained enslaved, as well as occupying herself with her children, Coin was probably in the plantation household, and given that Pierre was one of the wealthiest men in Natchitoches parish, she probably had enslaved servants to undertake the heavier housework and had very little or no contact with agricultural work. So this was going on the whole time. This woman who married this white man, her sons, her children, ended up basically in the family business owning slaves. Now, this is from the Hutchinson Center for African and African American Research. You can look this up. Now, very good book right here by William Lauren Katz, Black Indians, A Hidden Heritage. Here is, it holds enough information to cut the notion that natives and so-called African Americans, are not brothers. They're not one. They're not family. So this is definitely a very important book to get because it has a lot of great information in it. It explains the relationship between the natives and the so-called Negroes in the Americas. This is page 106 to page 108. Now check this out. It says when Spain ordered a counterattack, their armed forces included a black regiment and the Negroes and Lakes white officers. The British concluded that they had more to worry about from this force starting Georgia than from anything Spanish troops might do. At around this time, British colonists in the southern colonies began introducing the practice of African slavery among neighboring Native Americans. They concentrated on the 5 civilized nations, Cherokees, Chickasaws, Choctaws, Creeks, and Seminoles, as the largest body of Indians present on their borders. The aim was to be more secure by making Indians partners in their system. Indians who accepted slavery would not take in runaways fleeing from European masters. Except for the Seminoles, the 5 civilized nations began to accept foreign idea of slavery. Even so, the idea of how it should work differed from the British practices. So at first, those 5, which would include the Seminoles, accepted it, taking in slaves, but then the Seminoles backed out. So now it's the 4 other nations, right? But even when they did, their idea of quote unquote slavery or servitude was the Europeans' idea of what slavery was, because when you look up, when you find out and research how natives had captives, it's a complete different way from how Europeans did it. Their captives became part of their tribes. You understand? Information speak for itself. Quaker slaveholder John Bartram, botanist to the King of England, visited some Indian owners in 1770. He found their slaves dressed better than the chief, married into the nation easily, and their children were free and considered in every respect equal to the other members. After a visit to the creeks, Bartram wrote, "I saw in every town in the nation I visited captives, some extremely aged, who were free and in as good circumstances as their masters, and all slaves have their freedom when they marry, which is permitted and encouraged, and they and their offspring are in every way upon an equality with their conquerors." So although these other four particular tribes did accept bringing in the enslaved, Southern Kingdom brothers and sisters, it was completely different to what the Europeans were doing. They were making them part of their tribe. They were giving them rank. They were marrying them off. They were giving them their freedom. You understand? So when you have brothers that say, you see, they enslaved us, they can't be Israel. They don't know this history to know how that went down, how that operated. Continued. But how did Native Americans view the way Europeans treated their African prisoners? Let's read. Two European missionaries trying to convert the Delaware nation returned rejected, but with this report on the Delaware response to their plea. So these missionaries went to these particular natives trying to convert them to their ways. And so this is what the natives replied to these missionaries. It says, "They rejoiced exceedingly at our happiness and thus being favored by the Great Spirit, and felt very grateful that we had considered to remember our brethren," typo, "our brethren in the wilderness, but they could not help recollecting that we had a people among us, whom, because they differed from us in color, we had made and made them suffer great hardships and lead miserable lives. Now, they could not see any reason, if a people being black entitled us, then to deal with them, not equally qualify the same treatment." Rejected these European missionaries because they seen how they were treating the so-called African men, women, and children. So they said, "No, we see how you treat them because of their color. What makes you think, that we're not aware that that's what you're going to do to us eventually?" So no, let's continue on. They therefore determined to wait to see whether all black people amongst us were made thus happy and joyful before they would put confidence in our promises. For they thought a people who had suffered so much and so long by our means should be entitled to our first attention. And therefore they had sent back the two missionaries with many thanks, promising that when they saw the black people among us restored to freedom and happiness, they would gladly receive our missionaries. So they rejected the missionaries, said, "Nah, we don't want nothing to do with that. When you restore these people's freedom, when you make those people happy, then come back and see us. Then we'll deal with you." See, but this is the information regarding the relationship between natives and so-called, African Americans during the slave era, that, these people who bring this doctrine out, they don't bring this information out. Why? It's biased research. Continuing on, page 109. In treaty after treaty, Southern colonists made native nations promise fugitive slaves. Particular point, when you had slave runaways, a lot of times they were run into territory. And this is what happened. In 1721, the five civilized nations solemnly, a governor of Virginia, of Virginia, to deliver slaves, but nothing happened. The British complained bitterly on behalf of their slave owners. The chiefs apologized for the excess of Native American life. When angry slave hunters decided to take matters into their own hands, they met fierce opposition. In 1751, Captain Tobias Fitch sent off a posse of 5 to retrieve a slave living. A Creek chief stood between them and the black man, cut their rope, and threw it in a fire. Then he warned them his villagers had as many guns as they did. The posse were happy to be alive. So this particular enslaved brother ran off. You know, he escaped his. He sought refuge amongst the natives into the Creek Nation. And so the master sent 5 men to retrieve this man, and the Creek told him, no, you just keep in mind, we have as many guns as you do, so hit the road, Jack. You see that? This is the relationship between the natives, you know, and the Southern Kingdom that these people don't want to bring forth. Now, getting into chapter 3, says we cannot dig too deep a gulf. Now, the title of this particular chapter just says it all. You understand? They purposely says it in the title, dig too deep a gulf. That's why, as time went on, there began to be a separation, a bit of hate between the two people, between the Northern and the Southern Kingdom at this particular point, between the natives and the so-called African Americans, because they're the ones who plotted on separating the two peoples. Because in 1522, Europeans in the Americas first learned that slavery did not easily lead to enormous wealth. On Christmas Day, African and Indian slaves on a plantation owned by Diego Columbus rose and murdered their masters and overseers. Nearby Native Americans joined the rebels. The beautiful island of Hispaniola shook with the first recorded slave rebellion in the New World. So going back to when they landed on the island, we all know Hispaniola to be Cuba and Dominican Republic today. So the natives of Hispaniola, alongside the so-called Negro, banded together for their first rebellion on the island. So the conspiracy has spread across the sprawling sugar plantations in weeks before Christmas. Patiently, the plotters waited until Christmas Day, when the planters and their families would be loaded with food, soaked with liquor, and too weak or sleepy to offer much resistance. Then they struck, plunging into the night to kill whites and find freedom. For 2 days, they met with little opposition. But on the third, Spanish troops caught up with the rebels in an open field and opened fire. The fugitives broke for the woods. The Europeans were unfamiliar with the treacherous terrain near the city of Santo Domingo. Few were willing to pursue their most dangerous slaves into an area suited to guerrilla warfare. Masters and slaves learned some important lessons from this first bloody confrontation. Enslaving Indians and Africans was not going to be free from pain. Masters in a slave land would not sleep easily each night. Europeans concluded it was absolutely necessary to arm and use one race to fight the other. Let me repeat that. Europeans concluded it was absolutely necessary to remain armed and use one race to fight the other. A French colonial dispatch later in the century put the matter simply: the law is hard, but it is both wise and necessary in a land of 15 slaves to 1 white. Between 2 races, we cannot dig too deep a gulf. So they understood the only way to keep the power that they had on the island was to dig a deep trench between the 2 peoples, to make sure that these 2 people begin to fight one another and not band together, because they greatly outnumber us. And we can't keep control of this island, of these people, if they continue to band together and fight against us. So this mentality of making these against another began from this point on. All right, let's continue on. continued on page 34. The enslaved also learned some lessons. Their owners would rise to any level of violence and arm to anyone to protect bondage and their grip on the Americas. Europeans would throw their own soldiers into the fray or hire Indians living nearby. So, okay, went back. I'm not sure what happened there. Give me 1 second. Okay. Slaves began to reason that their success might depend on their ability to make friends among neighboring Indians. Friends do not hunt friends. The European policy of divide and conquer that began on Christmas Day 1522 introduced elements of deep division to the Americas. It gives you a specific date. Christmas Day 1522. Slavery and its cruel legacy left a bloody trail across the grass and soil of the Americas. It spread to Mexico and along the coastline of South America to Cape Horn, where Atlantic and Pacific Oceans meet. See, all it takes is just a little bit of digging. You don't even have to go and dig that deep into the history books to find out why at one point there was a divide between the two nations. That's because it was caused by who? The conqueror. '36. It was in Mexico that Europeans made the strongest effort to keep Africans apart from Native Americans. Black men, for the most part, outnumbered their women and so sought Indian wives. A Native American wife meant, if she was free, that children born to her would be free, not slaves. So extensive was the contact between the red and black people that Spanish law prohibited the two races or marrying as early. Hernandez was given a royal order to keep Indians in their villages apart from Africans at all costs. Let's skip down to the genetic blending of the two people clearly weakened the control of Europeans, the control Europeans wanted over their slaves. Europeans feared any dark person might be a slave driven to desperation or out of revenge. One lived in constant fear, wrote a Spanish colonist. So the blending between the two nations at one point, the coming together of these two nations at one point had the Spanish conquistadors in fear. They had these Spanish colonists in fear. Why? Because their biggest fear was for these two nations to come together and form revolts and take over North, South, and Central America. Now, this is a photo from the book. It says, entitled America. This antique French engraving shows African and Native American people living in harmony and happiness in their own village. Page 38. So this is what the man saw, how these two so-called separate people were interacting with one another. As you can see here, they're listening to music, to their drums and their dancing, and you can see from the picture, there's no war between the two. There's no issue between the two. Upon meeting one another, this is how it was. But it was the European colonists, the European conquerors, who set that wedge. Now I'm gonna always keep on harping on this particular subject because it all cuts the notion that the natives couldn't possibly be Israelites because they fought against so-called African Americans because they had African American servants or whatnot. But yet the history books give context and understanding as to the relationships between the two tribes, Southern and Northern Kingdom. Continue. Now we're going to get into linking up the history along with the curses of Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter. And we're going to begin with this. Now, this is from Tribal College, Journal of American Indian Higher Education. So you can look this up. This is volume 28, number 1, fall of 2016, by Colin G. Calloway, PhD, professor of Native American Studies and History at Dartmouth College. One of the main arguments they use is to say, well, they were never on slave ships. The natives were never taken on slave ships. They were never enslaved. They were never taken off their land on boats and taken to another land. Well, let's see. Indian slavery, like war and disease, exacted a terrible toll in the 17th century. The English kidnapped Indians during early contacts, but the Pequot War, 1636 to 1637, provided the first opportunity to acquire Indian captives in large numbers and justify enslavement, initiating and shaping a labor system that would characterize New England's 150 years. Indeed, Neville argues the English and the Indian allies may take the war's main purpose. Pequots were condemned to slavery in New England, the Caribbean, and elsewhere. 1,000 Indians were taken captive during King Philip's War to global slave markets. Roughly 500 were shipped to global slave markets and ended up laboring on plantations in Jamaica and Bermuda, rowing galleys in the Mediterranean, parts of the Mediterranean, or building forts in Morocco. So these natives were put on ships and being taken to the Mediterranean, being taken to Morocco. The rest were distributed among English colonists who took more captives in wars against the Abenakis. When captives dried up, New Englanders imported Indian slaves from the Carolinas and Florida, or transformed free Indians into unfree labor by enslavement, quote unquote. So they're saying the natives were never shipped on slave ships. This says different. They say that the natives never performed hard labor, free labor. Well, here it says different. It says into unfree labor by judicial enslavement, as courts sentenced Indians to terms of servitude and slavery as a punishment for crimes and debts. Indentures and apprenticeships of Indian children often merge into de facto slavery. Tell me this doesn't fit Deuteronomy 28, especially the 68th verse. And one thing about Deuteronomy 28 and 68, and about the curses in general, the curses is not just a one-time thing. Anytime that the nation of Israel broke the Most High's laws, those curses came upon them. That's what Israel needs to understand. Deuteronomy 28 wasn't just a one-time thing. And that information that we just read from that article could be found in this book, Brethren by Nature, by Margaret Ellen Noel. Continuing on, Bartolome de las Casas, an account much abbreviated of the destruction of the Indies with related texts. Heavy book, shows what happened to the natives, through North, South, and Central America, when the Spaniards came. And this is another book to get. Especially, I would recommend this book especially for those who specifically believe the natives not to be Israel. Now read this book and then read Deuteronomy 28 and compare the two. Magun, do you have something to say real quick before I get into this book?
You said what, King?
You have something to say real quick before I get into this book?
No, I mean, I'll briefly say that a lot of things you're bringing out, it debunks the arguments that Hispanics are not Israelites, because what we're seeing is the Israelites or the so-called Hispanics, Native American Indians, we're going through the curses. Not only that, but just like Jeremiah 50th chapter, in the 33rd verse, it says we oppress together. So what we're seeing is information on how so-called Hispanic, Latinos, and we're oppressed together, which also goes into prophecy. So again, y'all brothers and sisters that's listening, make sure you take this information, study it, and digest it, because it's real heavy, especially when you get into the history. There's a lot of history that brothers and sisters don't know about pertaining the relationship between so-called blacks and so-called Hispanics, right? So, just get into, studying history, Israel, right? So go ahead, Karen.
Con. And that's basically like, my aim with this particular presentation and the style in which I did it, because brothers and sisters, and then me in the past I've done other presentations and showing the archaeology and whatnot, because the archaeology is always there, the Hebrew archaeology within the Americas, but some people just don't want to even look at that part of it. They just want to look at the biblical aspect, mainly the curses. So this particular presentation, I'm bringing out this history of what happened to the natives, so it could be compared to Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter. So continuing on, this is from page 68. It says, and with only this I would conclude, this relation of their wretchedness and ferocity, that since they entered into these lands until today, that is 16 years, they have sent many ships. Now remember, keep in mind the amount of years. It says 16 years since the Spanish came to the Americas at this particular point that Bartolome de las Casas is speaking of. So for 16 years, they have sent many ships loaded and filled with Indians over the sea to be sold for slaves in Santa Marta and in the island of Hispaniola and Jamaica and the island of San Juan. This is above 1 million Indians, and even today, in the year 1542, they still send them. So this could be compared and matched up with Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter, verse 68. It says over 1 million throughout the 16 years. So that argument has to be cast aside. This is from the Library of Congress, published in 1596. It says, and they would put them in chains so that they would not leave behind the burthens, weighing 3 arrobas, that he set upon their backs. And it fell out one time, of the many times that he did this, that of our 1,000 Indians, not 600 alive to their houses, for he left them all dead upon the roads. For when some would grow tired, and their feet be tired and bloody from the great burdens, and they would sicken from hunger and hard labor and weakness, so as to not unshackle them from their chains, he would cut off their heads at the neck, and the head would fall to one side and the body to the other. So this photo is from the Library of Congress, Native Americans enslaved by the Spaniards. And this is also in the book Bartolome de las Casas, page 26, to show the bondage and the free labor throughout the years. This is from Newsweek.com. Let's read Deuteronomy 28, verse 32. It says, thy sons and thy daughters shall be given unto another people, and thine eyes shall look and fail with longing for them all the day long, and there shall be no might in thine hand. Of course, we know this is another one of the Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter. Now, when you skip down to the red, it reads, according to one scholarly estimate, this act may have affected as many as 20,000 California Indians, including 4,000 children, kidnapped from their parents and employed primarily servants and farm laborers. So this here, you can match it up with Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter, verse 32. So far, there's 2 historical facts that can be linked up with these 2 particular verses in Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter so far. This is Queen Anacaona, Massacre of the Queen and Her Subjects by Jules Van Winch, published in 15, El Brevisma, Relación de la Destrucción de las Indias, written by Bartolome de las Casas. You see they were being conquered here. This is what was going on at this particular time in history. And this is Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 16. It says, cursed shalt thou be in the city, and cursed shalt thou be in the field. Now, let's speed it up to more modern times. This is an article, and it says, "Why talking about Latinos killed by police?" It says, as videos of Alton Sterling and Fernando Castillo, two African-American men shot and killed by police last week, went viral, and the names became hashtags. Many called out a lack of media attention for Latinos who were killed by officers that same week. Organizations like the National Council of La Raza, Voto Latino, and even Black Lives Matter are raising awareness of police use of force in Latino communities. Police killings of brown people often go underreported, says Eric Gonzalez, Vice President of the NCLR's Office of Research, Advocacy, and Legislation. So we all know what's been going on past few years now. It's been going on. The history of America, began, but now it's broadcasted more because of the world of social media that we live on now. Everybody has their cell phone, so everybody, records what's going on, what's been going on, the unjust killings, right? But the media only shows one particular side. It shows the so-called African American brothers and sisters being unjustly murdered, but you have the same amount that's happening to so-called Latinos, but that's not being broadcasted as much. Why? Because it keeps two groups of people from looking at it and saying, okay, the same thing is going on with two of us. We need to come together as a people. You understand? Because in the previous slides, it showed how in the past, how our ancestors, they both seen how they were being enslaved, how they were both being murdered and unjustly killed, and they banded together. And so the conqueror was afraid of that. So now fast forward to today in modern time, they're making sure to not broadcast the Latinos being unjustly murdered at the same rate as our so-called African American or West Indian brothers and sisters, because they want to make sure that, especially today, the two groups of people do not band together.
Hey, Ken, can I say something real quick?
Come, Ken.
Yeah, I just want to bring out something real briefly. That's another tactic the white man uses to keep us arguing who's going through the most struggles. Because if you look at it, like if you got like in LA, right, you got so-called Mexicans, you got so-called blacks, they arguing about, well, the Mexicans is saying this is my land first, y'all just got here, and then the blacks are saying, well, y'all don't go through as much struggle as we do, and things of that nature. So it becomes a war of who went through the most struggle. So while we fighting about, who went through the most struggle, the white man's laughing and saying we're doing our job and keeping these people separate and fighting amongst each other. So it's just another tactic how the white man uses that to separate us and fight amongst each other, even arguing on who goes through the struggle the most. I just wanted to bring that out.
And I mean, that's the fact, and that just goes to show the Deuteronomy 20:16, man, it is a real thing, man. Cursed shall thou be in the city, cursed shall thou be in the field. That's in every sense of those words, because we're the ones being oppressed in our own neighborhoods, right, by one another, because we fighting one another because of the neighborhoods that we're living in and the conditions that was created in our neighborhoods. But that was all by strategic, by the one who wants to keep us from coming together. So now let's read a little bit. In American history, racial conflict has largely black and white, but the history is much more complicated, leaving out Native Americans as well as Asians and Hispanics, said Aaron Fountain, historian of youth activism at Indiana University. Americans don't see any kind of historical context when Latinos are victims of state violence, despite the fact that there is historical context here. While blacks and Hispanics have interactions with police at rates proportional to their population, according to the U.S. Bureau of Justice statistics, both groups are overrepresented when it comes to traffic searches and arrests. Hispanics, for example, make up 17.6% of the U.S. population, but represent 23% of all searches and nearly 30% of arrests. Among minorities, the rate of police killings for Latinos is second to those of African Americans. As of today, an estimated 94 Latinos have been killed by police in 2016 alone. Now, this is 2016, so now imagine the increase 2 years.
Yes, lock your brothers and sisters. I guess it's bad connection with the brother. Let's see if he comes back on. Um, King, I'm not sure if you got it on mute or you got kicked off. Right. So but you know, just like the brothers bringing out, man, is powerful information regarding what blacks and Hispanics are going through together, and even what we're going through to this day. Because the media is an outlet that, you know, it don't highlight all of the struggles that the so-called Hispanics are going through, and this, you know, even though they cover certain things of what the so-called black community is going through, they still don't cover everything, you know, in terms of what's happening in our community. You know, right now we had a young so-called Dominican brother who was stabbed up in the Bronx, right, in 183rd Street, and you know, it shows too how the so-called Hispanics are fulfilling Deuteronomy 28th chapter in terms of the curses. You know, the 54th verse when it says, you know, your eyes shall be evil towards your brother. So we even have so-called Hispanics fighting amongst each other, you know, fulfilling prophecy and fulfilling the conditions that the white man taught us to be in. Okay, so yes, there is a relationship between blacks, Hispanics, Native Americans according to history. The Bible also records, you know, the relationship that we went through and we have even unto this day. So again, I'm trying to bring the brother back. Let me see what's going on here. All right, let me give him a call real quick, see what's good. But yeah, brother, this is something that you should take into consideration and you know, really take to heart, because this is the result, right? What we see today is a result of what's happening. Okay, so the brother's telling me he's on the connection, he's on, we can't hear him. So let me check. Can you hear him? Nah, we can't hear you, King. So maybe you got it on mute. Y'all can hear you on the phone. Trying to see if we can hear you on the live. We can't hear you right now. Yeah, try to come off and rejoin. The same process. Go through to the email and open up the link and sign in. All right, so I'm just keep edifying the people while you do that, man. Again, brothers and sisters, history is important. It's important because if you don't know your history, Deuteronomy 32nd chapter says what? Remember the days of old. You're supposed to learn the history to find out why we're in this situation, period, and why, you know, is certain tactics being used against us in order to separate us. Okay, all right. So the brothers back on. All praise to the Most High. Let me make sure we hear you. Can you say something real quick? Yeah, hello. Yeah, we can't hear you, King. I'm not sure if maybe do you have your headset on or something like that? Mm. Yeah, well, you just got a reaction, so I'm thinking maybe we can hear you redo what you just did. Hey, I'm putting this out there too, man. So while we wait on the brother to do his thing, um, we'll be on 183rd and Bathgate tomorrow, preaching the word of the Most High. You know, again, I was bringing out earlier a so-called young Dominican brother got stabbed up, you know, by his own up in the Bronx. So we're gonna go out there, teach the word, and try to gather as much, you know, brothers and sisters as we can, you know, just to stop the violence and to come back to the laws of the Most High, man. So, you know, if any brothers and sisters out there, you know, come check us out, come through, you know, support. You know, from what I'm hearing is a whole bunch of, you know, people gathering around and you know, coming up with candles and things of that nature. So come through and check us out if y'all can, man. So Mala, I want to hear you. Yeah, go ahead, King. On you.
That sound clear or sound far?
Now you sound good.
All right, cool. We gonna continue fight to sound clear.
Yeah, you good, bro.
All right. So we're going to begin where it says among minorities. It says among minorities, the rate of police killings for Latinos is second to those of African Americans. As of today, an estimated 94 Latinos have been killed by police in 2016 alone, making up 16% of 585 police-involved killings this year. In contrast, people who are Black or African American are only 13.3% of the U.S. population. But and we know, according when you know the history of the census, these numbers are biased numbers, and these are not accurate numbers. Because on top of that, not everybody fills out a census, so these are not accurate numbers. You know, the as far as the population is concerned, it says 13.3% of the population, but 144 Black Americans have been killed by police in 2016. At 25%, those deaths represent disproportionate number of officer-involved fatalities compared to the population. It's worth noting that a person can be both Latino and Black, and sometimes a victim's race may not be disclosed at all, creating potential for incidents involving both Latinos and Black Americans to be underreported, Rodriguez said. Many national databases are dependent on self-reported statistics from local and state agencies, making them potentially incomplete. So the amount that's recorded, this goes to show that there's a high chance of probability that the amount, at the rate at which Blacks and Latinos are being murdered by police year by year is actually higher than what's reported on the census. But there's a portion that's not filled out because, you know, you have Latinos that are also listed as Black, and then you have, you know, the so-called biracial. One might have the so-called Latino parent, one might have a Black parent. So, you know, they fill out the census one way, or they don't fill out the census at all. So it throws the numbers off. The numbers actually might be higher as to the rate of Blacks and Latinos killed by police. It says there's lots of challenges in reporting cases for the Latino community in particular because of questions around identity. This is going back to the census. We just don't have enough information to document all the cases that are occurring. Certainly not by race and ethnicity, said Rodriguez, but there is a recognition more broadly that deaths at the hands of law enforcement are having too many racialized outcomes. So the same thing that's happening to them, the same thing that's happening to us. You know, this is happening to both of us as a community. It's just the Latinos being unjustly murdered is not being broadcast on a platform as largely as, you know, everyone else is at the moment. You know, and that's done by strategic design. Continuing on, it says, let's just stick to the writing in red. It says, because Americans may not know the extensive history of Latinos in the United States and its struggle for civil rights, Fountain and Rodriguez both say the national focus on Latino issues is too limited. It can often revolve solely around immigration, particularly undocumented immigrants, who make up just 60% of the Latino population, as if the other 84% of the population isn't impacted by the issue. Fountain says. So when it comes to Latinos, when you read the news, the newspapers, and look at the newsroom, they report about so-called Latinos and what's going on amongst the so-called Latino community. You mainly hear about immigration, but that's only 60% of Latinos. Like the article says, what about the other 84%? Why isn't what they're going through, their pros and their struggles, why isn't that being reported? It's the 84%. Because Rodriguez adds that sometimes immigration can compound issues of police brutality. Local level law enforcement were signing agreements to act as immigration enforcement agents in many communities, he said. So they were empowered to do things that in some ways would enhance the probability of abuse and profiling. Both Fountain and Rodriguez say the public debate on the police brutality portrayed by the media as focusing solely on black and white silences the voices of Latinos. The movement for Black Lives Matter is doing something important, elevating all minority lives, and that's a critical part of the solution, Rodriguez says. But if our response is narrow and limited, the national response will be narrow and limited as well. And that's problematic as we move toward a country that is increasingly diverse. So basically, the ending statement is saying you may have other minority groups that now are speaking on, behalf of what's going on in our community or whatnot. But if we ourselves don't speak out on what's going on, then what's the point? It's pointless. It's up to us to speak on, what's going on in our community. And this is from pbs.org. That's where you can find that source of that article. Now we're jumping back into time, going back 500 plus years ago, jumping back into Native history, but this time dealing with the Aztecs, right? When you read Deuteronomy 28, chapter 61, another one of the curses, it says, also every sickness and every plague which is not written in the book of this law, them will the Lord bring upon thee until thou be destroyed. Now this is a photo from the Codex Florentine. It says Native American Aztec people of Mexico dying of smallpox induced by the Spaniards. Right, so this is a copy of the Codex Florentine. So we read about the chicken pox and the measles and the syphilis, so on and so forth, which the Spaniards and the Europeans have brought to the Americas and spread to the natives. You know what I'm saying? So they died of all these illnesses and sicknesses because their body wasn't immune to these diseases that came from these European countries or anywhere else because they didn't exist in the Americas at this point in time. So they would have died from something as easily as a common cold. But we also show that this particular curse here in Deuteronomy 28:61 also fits the natives. So we have 28:68, 28:32, 28:61. Now this here is Hispaniola, Dominican Republic, destruction of the Indies, Bartolome de las Casas. What do you see here? Free labor, free slave labor. They're tilling the land, their own land. Now Deuteronomy 28:30 gets to another curse. Thou shalt betroth a wife, and another man shall lie with her. Thou shalt build a house, and thou shalt not dwell therein. Thou shalt plant a vineyard, and shalt not gather the grapes thereof. And this is page 43 of Bartolome de las Casas. It reads, he, Pedro de Alvarado, would unmarry and steal from the married men their wives and their daughters, and give them to sailors and soldiers, so as to make them happy and to take them into his armadas. He swelled the ships with Indians, where all would perish of thirst and hunger. Oh, how many orphans did he make? How many fathers did he rob of their children? How many men strip of their wives? How many women leave without their husbands? How many acts of adultery and rapine and savagery was he the cause and reasons of? So the children were being taken. He was taking men's wives away, giving them to his sailors. See this? This is Deuteronomy 28, verse 30. Thou shalt betroth a wife, and another man shall lie with her. See that? That is the curse. That can't be denied. Continuing on. Now it's page 78 on the New Kingdom of Granada. This is Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 33. The fruit of thy land and thy labors shall another nation which thou knowest not eat up, and thou shalt only be oppressed and crushed away. Let's go to page 78. It reads, the witness in that trial do attest that all the kingdom was at peace serving the Spaniards, with the Indians giving the Spaniards food from their labors constantly, and tilling their fields and doing other things, and bringing them much gold and gems, emeralds, and all that they had and could. See that? Deuteronomy 28:33. Fits the curse. This fits the curse of Deuteronomy 28:33. They were tilling their own soil, giving of their own sustenance that they worked for, that they kinded to the conquistadors. Another cut. Deuteronomy 28:37. If thou shalt become an astonishment and a proverb and a byword among all the nations whither the Lord shall lead thee. Now we all know this logo, the Cleveland Indians logo. A lot of people don't know that throughout the years there's been controversy with the logo. You have many Native American tribes even to this day who boycott the logo. Because when it was created to be a sign of disrespect towards the natives. Sort of like this. Continuing on to the next slide. It's called the Curse of Chief Wahoo. Now this you can find at mlb.nbcsports.com. That's the link at the bottom. So you type that in, nbcsports.com, and type in what Chief Wahoo really means. Chief Wahoo, that's the Cleveland Indians logo name. It says, you've heard me go on about Chief Wahoo before. If you think I'm just being an alarmist, liberal, pansy about it. However, I'd ask that you educate yourself a bit and understand what Wahoo is really about. You can do that by reading my friend Peter Taco's excellent article about it in his latest edition of Cleveland Scene. I think this quote from a team executive is telling. Now, this is a quote from a team executive. It says, when people look at Chief Wahoo, they think baseball, says De Biasio. He calls the issue one of individual perception and explains that the franchise's acknowledgement to the sensitivities involved. It is evidenced by the fact that it does not animate nor humanize the logo. But the question raised by the organization's stance on the symbol are as glaring as Wahoo's skin tone. If it's a matter of individual perception, why would the perception of those who think of baseball when they see the logo matter more than the perception of those who see the demeaning vestige of America's racist past? So those who are defending the logo, saying, well, we're not giving it a human character, so it can't be racist. But yet the majority of the people feel it's demeaning. Why are they not doing away with it? It says, if the Indians recognize that it would be wrong to animate the logo, why keep it up? Why keep it around at all? And if they try to not humanize Wahoo, are they not admitting that in its current form, it's rather dehumanizing? I know there is zero chance that this comments thread won't turn into the same old Wahoo debate we always have. But what it often does tend to lack is actual history and information. To that end, I ask that you read Peter's article, you learn about the origin of Wahoo and the nature of the opposition to the logo. You'll be shocked to learn that, yes, real people are deeply and personally affected by Wahoo. It's not just the real fans like me. So this is just an article of this person bringing out what baseball executives, say about Wahoo and origin. And you see it here side by side, this particular image here that was used to portray the Southern Kingdom, so-called African Americans, West Indians. It's the same thing. Now this is an old movie. It's a clip from an old movie, Peter Pan. Now this is particular clip is Peter Pan and the Indians. Now let's see how they portray the natives here to further prove the point of the previous slide. Magun, I'm gonna play the video and you tell me how loud the audio is.
Khan.
You're nah, nigga, look, I got a t-shirt. This nigga's crazy. Big shit, bro. Yo, King, is that loud enough?
Yeah, Khan.
All right, Khan, I'm gonna play it back.
You can hear me? You can hear me now?
Yo, Malak.
Khan, King.
It sounds like somebody's in the background.
Khan, they just walked off.
Okay, now I thought that was the audio. That's not the audio. I can't hear it.
Let me know. You don't hear anything?
Yeah, it's real low. I can't hear nothing. If you want, you can send it to me, and I'll play it from here while you present the rest of the slides.
Khan, I'm gonna do that. So I'm gonna go on to the next slide. But you know what? Forget the audio. We have the visuals. So as it's playing, I just speak. But you see how the Cleveland Indians logo, how they portrayed the native as red, having red skin, and they portrayed them as that other offensive logo that they portrayed, so-called African American time in history. And look, so both people were being portrayed a certain way. You understand? So they were both taken as a proverb and a byword and being drawn into funny characters or whatnot. You understand? So that's another curse that they fit. And look how they were being portrayed in the cartoons. Look, see this? They have them dancing around, looking silly, looking crazy. You're gonna tell me this wouldn't be offensive? So I brought that clip out to show how even the natives in these cartoons that a lot of our people loved so much growing up, even though that one in particular is very old, the natives were being portrayed in that derogatory manner, in that stereotypical manner. You understand? So they fit proverb and the byword, so on and so forth. So far we're seeing how, according to history, it lines up perfectly to the curses of Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter. Now we're going to continue on with another curse, Deuteronomy chapter 28 and verse 49. It says, the Lord shall bring a nation against thee from afar, from the end of the earth, as swift as the eagle flieth, a nation whose tongue thou shalt not understand, a nation of fierce countenance, which shall not regard the person of old, nor show favor to the young. Now, I also have 2 Kings here. Why do I have 2 Kings? Because it's just going to further prove the point that I've made earlier about the curses not just being a one-time thing. The Most High always put Israel through curses when they broke his laws. Israel didn't just eat their children at one particular point in time. When you read in Kings, they did it. Israel didn't go into servitude just one time. Israel went through many captivities, and they went through the curses several times. You understand? So for anybody to say that, oh, well, the natives don't fit the curses, the slave trade, well, you're sadly mistaken. You don't know how these curses worked and how they occurred throughout the course of time. So I'm going to read 28:49 once more. It says, and the Lord shall bring a nation against thee from afar, from the end of the earth, as swift as the eagle flieth, a nation whose tongue thou shalt not understand, a nation of fierce countenance, which shall not regard the person of old, nor show favor to the young. Now watch, 2 Kings 8:12. And Hazael said, why weepeth my Lord? And he answered, because I know the evil that thou wilt do unto the children of Israel. Their strongholds wilt thou set on fire, and their young men wilt thou slay with the sword, and will dash their children and rip up their women with child. So now when you read this, 2 Kings 8:12, this is Elisha sees this vision, right, of Hazael, because he was servant to the king. But later on, he became king. And this vision that Elisha saw came to pass. So he did rip open the bellies of the pregnant Israelite women. He did dash the babies to pieces. He did slay the young men and the old men, right? So this is Deuteronomy 28 and verse 49, that curse happening at the time of Elisha. And now, fast forward to that, to just a little over 400, 500 years ago, the curses happened again regarding the natives and the so-called Negroes. So the curses are a recurring thing. So now let's go to page 70 of Bartolome de las Casas. It says, in another village, as it appeared to them that the villagers did not come forth so readily as they might, owing to the infamies of the heinous deeds that they had heard told of the Spaniards. So now the Spaniards had came to an Indian village, and they called for the Indians to come out, right? And now they were hesitant to come out because they already knew of the reputation that the Spaniards had. So they were hesitant in coming out and meeting the Spaniards. It says, they put to the sword and spear children and adults, babes and old persons, subjects and lords alike, and showed mercy to none. See that? So they didn't show mercy to the children, to the old, to the pregnant. Now this is Deuteronomy 28:49 in full effect. And here, this is the photo right here, the photo that you see aside of the writing from the book. This is in Bartolome de las Casas. He's a first-hand witness because he was there. And his book is his accounts of what he saw. So this picture is an accurate depiction of what the Spaniards were doing. You see here, he has a native child, a Taino child, by the legs, ready to dash him against the rocks. You understand? That's Deuteronomy 28:49. So you can't say that this particular person is versus the natives or the Latinos because we went through it. Now let's continue on. This is page 9. They would enter villages and spare not children or old people or pregnant women or women with suckling babes, but would open the woman's belly and hack the babe to pieces. Remember in the earlier video, the brother said the native woman never had babies cut from their stomach. Well, I have to find the brother and email him this book. I'm gonna have to mail a copy of the book. I'm not mailing my copy because the history shows different. The native woman had their babies cut from their stomach. They would enter the villages and spare not children or old people or pregnant women or women with suckling babes, but would open the woman's belly and hacked the babe to pieces as though they were butchering lambs shut up in their pen. Now watch that. You see how it says they were, cutting open a woman in that manner. Let's go back to the previous slide. The 2 Kings 8 and 12. The bottom part of the verse says, what did Elisha say? And their young men will thou slay with the sword and will dash their children. You see the photo, dashing children and rip up their woman with child. And we see that happening to the natives. You understand? So the curse is beyond the shadow of a doubt. Fit our forefathers and foremothers. Now let's continue on reading. They will make wagers who might slice open the belly of a man with one stroke of their blade, or cut off a man's head with one swift motion of their pike, or spill out his entrails. They would snatch babes from their mothers' breasts, take them by their feet, and dash their heads against the rocks. Others would fling them over their shoulders into the rivers, laughing and jeering. And as they fell into the water, they would call out, trash, you little bugger. Now let's go to Hosea 13, 12 through 16. The iniquity is bound up, his sin is hid. The sorrows of a travailing woman shall come upon him. He is an unwise son, for he should not stay long in the place of breaking forth of children. I will ransom them from the power of the grave. I will redeem them from death. O death, I will be thy plagues. O grave, I will be thy destruction. Repentance shall be hid from mine eyes. Though he be fruitful among his brethren, an east wind shall come. The wind of the Lord shall come from the wilderness, and his spring shall become dry, and his fountain shall be dried up. He shall spoil the treasure of all pleasant vessels. Verse 16, Samaria shall become desolate, for she has rebelled against her God. They shall fall by the sword, and their inhabitants shall be dashed in pieces, and their women with child shall be ripped up. Now, this particular curse in Deuteronomy chapter 28, and let's go back to the verse 49 and 2 Kings chapter 8, verse 12. You see how linking it up to Hosea 13 and 12 to 16, you see how in the northern kingdom, and specifically Ephraim, which would represent the northern kingdom as well, it says their infants would be dashed to pieces, their pregnant women would be ripped up. And now what did we just read in Bartolome de las Casas about the native woman and their babies? Their babies were dashed and their bellies were ripped open. So that curse 100%, 1000% links up with the natives. The history and the curses link up beyond shadow of a doubt. Let's keep going. This is page 42. Now let's go to another curse, Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 53. It says, and thou shalt eat the fruit of thy own body, the flesh of thy sons and of thy daughters, which the Lord thy God has given thee, in the siege and in the straitness wherein thy enemies shall distress thee. So the Most High is letting us know that our enemies, for breaking the curses, would have us in such dire straits and dire conditions that we will resort to cannibalism. Right? Now let's go to 2 Kings chapter 6, verse 25. It says, and there was a great famine in Samaria, northern kingdom, and behold, they besieged it until an ass's head was sold for 80 pieces of silver, and a fourth part of a cab of dove's dung for 5 pieces of silver. And as the king of Israel was passing by upon a wall, there cried a woman unto him, saying, help, my lord, O king. And he said, if the Lord do not help thee, whence shall I help thee? Out of the barn floor or out of the winepress? Let's read verse 28. And the king said unto her, what aileth thee? He's asking the woman, what's going on? What's bothering you? And she answered, this woman said unto me, give thy son, that we may eat him today, and we will eat my son tomorrow. So we boiled my son, and did eat him. And I said unto her, on the next day, give thy son, that we may eat him. She has hid her son. So now, Deuteronomy 28:53, the eating of the children, did come to pass in 2 Kings 6:25. And then when Israel broke the laws again, and the curses came upon us again, what happened? Let's read in the history of Bartolome de las Casas. Here we see a photo of that book, page 42. And what does it say at the bottom? Read the caption. It says, and thus there was the most outright and veritable butchery of human flesh, wherein in his presence children would be slain and cooked, and a man would be slain for his hands alone and his feet, which were considered to be a delicacy. So adults and especially babies were being eaten, their own children. They were cooking and boiling their own children. You understand? So that's another curse that can't be denied that the natives fit, that the so-called Latinos fit. Deuteronomy chapter 28 and verse 53. You understand that? And what's funny is that it specifically mentions Samaria, Ephraim, the head of the northern kingdom, going through this. So this is a super duper cut. Got to use that old school term, super duper. It can't be denied. Let's continue on. Now this is page 8 of California. Let me just see what slide I'm in, because I'm supposed to stop at a particular slide number. I don't want to go past the number that I'm supposed to go past, because I'm supposed to be doing a part 2. Okay, this is an 80 PowerPoint slide presentation. Okay, a few more slides left. It's a lot, King. You hear me, Magun?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear, King.
I can. Yeah, I accidentally closed it out, so just give me 1 second real quick. Yeah, so you see how, especially within those last curses, is 2 on point, 2 pinpoint exact for anybody to be able to deny that the natives didn't go through those particular curses. It came to the dashing of the children, the ripping of the pregnant woman, the eating of the children, the wives and the children being taken from them, the slave ships. You understand? So all right, so we're gonna go right back to slide number 43. This is California Indian Agency resistance. You see my screen, Khan?
Not.
All right. It says, despite the Spanish system or coercion, Indians resisted foreign domination, sometimes subtly, other times violently. In the missions, Native Americans occasionally disregarded orders or instructions given by the priests. Although Indians learned the Spanish language and various other tenets of Catholicism, they frequently retained their native languages, religious beliefs, rituals, ceremonies, songs, and oral narratives. Young Native American men defied the strict gender-segregated living conditions at the missions, slipping into the manjarios or dormitories of the young Indian women. Sometimes women escaped their nightly imprisonment to be with friends and families they love. Native women defied the church by aborting babies conceived by being raped by soldiers, civil officials, or priests. Why do I bring this up? Because you have many that say, you know, a lot of the natives today, a lot of the Latinos today are descendants of raped by the Spaniard seed. But yet we read here in the history books that many native women were aborting those babies of the Spaniards. That's something they were doing. So native women defied the church by aborting babies conceived by being raped by soldiers, civil officials, or priests. So that kills the notion, you understand, that all, especially the light-skinned natives or the light-skinned Latinos, are products of the Spaniard seed. When our mothers were purposely aborting these rape babies, you understand? So this right here kills that notion. This is a good book to get. It's a must-have. Continue on. Now, let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 43 and verse 44. The strangers that is within thee shall get up above thee very high, and thou shalt come down very low. He shall lend to thee, and thou shalt not lend to him. He shall be the head, and thou shalt be the tail. Now, I don't even need to show a next slide for this because this particular verse here is common sense. Who do you see in the ghettos within America? Blacks and Latinos, Native Americans stuck in their reservation. Who owns the diamond districts? Who controls the media? Who controls the food that we eat? The markets that we shop from? The clothing that we have to buy? Who owns the banks? You understand? Not blacks and Latinos, not natives. So tell me this curse right here, how it wouldn't fit us and our community and our people. Uno. 28:45. Moreover, all these curses shall come upon thee, and shall pursue thee and overtake thee, till thou be destroyed, because thou hearkenest not unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to keep his statutes which he commanded thee. These curses shall overtake thee until thou be destroyed. So all the previous slides that I brought forth showing the destruction of our people, of our forefathers, our ancestors, and how these curses fit them. And this particular verse here is, of course, we clearly see it stating why. Because we came against the power, our power, the Most High. And these curses are a sign as to identify who the Israelites are. So now going through the history, you can clearly see that the natives and the so-called Latinos, you understand, 100% fit these curses, man. It can't be denied. So these people pushing this this teaching that our people and our forefathers don't fit the curses, you know, they're not doing research. Either because they don't believe the information is out there, they may not know, or, you know, they just don't want to have to change their teaching. They don't want to be shown wrong. They don't want to be proved wrong. Whatever it is, you know, at the end of the day, the information is going to come out. You understand? Northern and Southern Kingdom nation. Prophecy can't be stalled. It can't be halted. It can't be stopped. Northern and Southern Kingdom will come together, and it's happening. It's happening. We see it day by day. As more brothers and sisters keep waking up to this truth, keep coming into this light. And that's all by the hand of the Most High. Ephraim and Judah shall be one stick. You understand? And there's nothing that anybody can do about it. Especially not these brothers and sisters that's pushing this false doctrine of the natives or Latinos not being Israelites. So I'll save this for part 2. I got about 40 something more slides, but I'll save that for part 2, King. Anything you want to say? That's it on that. You know, and let me just say this. You know, this is Captain Malak of AOC. If you ever seen any of my other presentations, like the one at Joel Benjamin, I'm not too flashy or lively with my presentation one or whatnot. I'm just strictly about the information. I'm going to put the information, I'm going to explain the information, I'm going to talk about the information. I'm all about information. You understand? Unfortunately, a lot of our people, we don't have the ability to concentrate for too long when it's just a bunch of information being just shown in front of you. But even if that being the case, I hope that your brothers and sisters that are watching this, you know, come back to it. Watch it a couple times. Watch it 3, 4 times, 5 times, so that you can digest all the information that was brought forth. So you can see how it links with Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter.
Khan, take this, brothers and sisters, and let me say something, man. Take each section and make sure you digest it. Make sure you follow, you know, thoroughly the information that you're seeing, and you investigate it, and you sit there and you digest it, man. Don't just go and breeze through the, you know, through the lesson. you know, without really sitting there and taking each session and taking into consideration that this is just evidence and proof that so-called Latinos, Native American, Hispanics are Israelites, man. So there's only like a short segment, or not a short segment, but there's only the first series of parts that we're gonna do, and in the future we're gonna come out with more parts, more presentations. I'm gonna come, you know, and any Northern Kingdom brothers that want to come out and, you know, present information, you know, just reach out, man. Don't be afraid. One thing is, you know, a lot of times our Northern Kingdom brothers, you feel the vexation, but it's all about what you're doing for the work, what you're putting in work, right? If you're putting in work, then you have nothing to complain about. But if you're not putting in work, sit there and feel vexed. So, brothers again, you know, reach out. You know what I mean? Brother Mala'at, you know, powerful presentation. You know, the water Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shah. You know, you came through, you brought that powerful, you know, information. Brothers and sisters can definitely learn from this. And again, brothers and sisters, it's gonna be just only a segment of what's gonna be ongoing in the future. So, in closing, I'll say subscribe to the page. You know, subscribe to Long Live Yahweh Shah on YouTube as well. Mala'at, you have anything you want to plug in? Where can you find you at?
Con, you could just you can go to YouTube, type in Alpha Omega Clan. You could reach me at ambassadormalak@gmail.com. Yeah, man, just stay tuned, man. Brothers is we're gonna keep bringing this information out. You know, it has to keep being brought forth, and you know that's our duty, that's our job. So that's gonna be our number one focus.
Done. So we love you and Ala'at the water for coming on and bringing in the information, King. You know, we appreciate it. You know, we know you, man. You know, you got dedication and hard work. So, you know, we definitely want to acknowledge that. You know what I mean? All praise to the Most High. You know, so the water once again, King. Shalom to all the brothers and sisters listening. Most High bless y'all. Shabbat shalom. Y'all not there partying, none of that. We watching y'all. You know what I'm saying? You know, that, Most High is beautiful, man. All praise to the Most High. So with that, Shabbat shalom. Mala'at the water once again. Shalom to you and your family, King. May the Most High bless you.
King. The water for having me.
Khan, you already know. Shalom.
Shalom.